I never imagined the sound of knocking could feel like a sentence. 3 sharp hits on the door, official, final, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your mind even catches up. When I opened it, the morning air turned cold. 2 officers stood there, eyes heavy with the kind of pity that only makes things worse. One of them said my name, the other read my rights. Behind them, neighbors began to gather, their curiosity like static in the air. Inside the house, 4 small faces stared at me from the hallway, wide-eyed, confused, terrified. My kids, or at least that's what I'd called them for 12 years. The oldest, Ethan, froze when he saw the handcuffs. The youngest started to cry, clutching the sleeve of my worn sweater. I wanted to tell them it was okay, that this was all a mistake, that I'd fix it like I always did. But my mouth was dry and my voice was gone. "Sir, you're under arrest for kidnapping minors," one of the officers said. His tone was gentle, almost apologetic, like even he knew how wrong this looked. Kidnapping. The word didn't belong in my world. It didn't belong in the same sentence as my name. For 12 years, I'd fed those kids, taught them, stayed up through fevers, scraped knees, nightmares. I'd missed birthdays, jobs, relationships, everything, because they needed me. Because their mother, my sister, had disappeared one night and never came back. Until now. She was standing at the end of the driveway, immaculate as ever, framed by the flashing blue and red lights. Expensive coat, sunglasses hiding her eyes. That familiar smirk softened into a mask of sorrow for the cameras that had already started clicking. Her crocodile tears sparkled as she shook her head, pretending to tremble. "I can't believe you did this," she whispered loud enough for the crowd to hear. "Did what? Raised your kids? Kept them alive? Gave them a home?" I wanted to scream, but rage doesn't sound human when it comes from the throat of someone already condemned. The neighbors watched as the officer clicked the cuffs around my wrists. The metallic snap echoed like a gunshot. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, "I always thought something was off about him." They didn't know. No one did. I'd never told anyone the truth about that night 12 years ago, when my sister showed up at my door with 4 crying children and a suitcase she wouldn't open. "Just a few weeks," she'd said. "I'll come back for them." She never did. I never asked why. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I thought family meant forgiving before understanding. But standing there in the morning light, wrists bound, the children I'd raised being led away by strangers, I realized forgiveness had been my biggest mistake. The reporters shouted questions as they dragged me to the car. "Did you really take them? Why would you do it? What did you tell the kids?" Their voices blurred into one long hum, like a swarm of bees in my skull. Through the window, I saw my sister kneeling beside the children, playing the role of the heartbroken mother reunited with her babies. The same woman who had vanished for over a decade now, weeping on cue for an audience. I locked eyes with Ethan before they closed the car door. He didn't speak, but the question in his face gutted me. Why is she doing this? I didn't have the answer, not yet, but I could feel the weight of it in my bones. A darkness waiting to surface, a truth so ugly it would make this morning look merciful. And the reason she did it was darker than anything I could imagine. 12 years earlier, it was a rainy night that smelled like wet asphalt and panic. My sister showed up at my apartment door soaked through, mascara running down her cheeks, clutching a baby in one arm and holding the hands of 3 crying kids with the other. I hadn't seen her in months. She didn't even knock. She just stared at me with eyes that looked hollowed out by something I didn't yet understand. "I just need a few weeks," she said. Her voice cracked, like she'd rehearsed the line too many times. "I need to get away. Clear my head." She pushed past me before I could answer, sat the baby on my couch, and started pacing. I remember her shaking hands, the way she couldn't look directly at any of her children. I wanted to ask where their father was, but the question died in my throat when I saw the bruises under her sleeves. "I'll come back soon," she promised. "Just don't let them forget me." I didn't know what to say. I was 27, single, freshly heartbroken from a breakup that had already left me hollow. My apartment barely had enough space for me, let alone 4 kids under 10. But when the oldest, Ethan, tugged at my sleeve and asked, "Uncle, can we stay here tonight?" I said yes. Because how could I not? That night turned into a week. The week turned into months, then a year. Her calls stopped after the second month, first excuses, then silence. I tried to track her down, but her phone number was dead, her social media deleted, her last known address empty. It was like she'd vanished into thin air, leaving me with 4 tiny lives that didn't understand why Mom wasn't coming home. Those early years were chaos stitched together by caffeine and blind faith. I took 2 jobs, mornings at a diner, nights stocking shelves. My days started before dawn and ended long after midnight. I learned how to braid hair, how to fix a bike chain, how to make mac and cheese 4 different ways because each kid had their own opinion about cheese. The baby, Ava, would only fall asleep if I hummed the same song my mother used to sing to us. The bills piled up, the rent went late, but somehow we made it through. There were nights I wanted to collapse, mornings I thought I couldn't do it anymore. But every time one of them smiled or handed me a crayon drawing labeled Dad, something inside me healed just a little. I stopped counting the sacrifices because love blurred the math. We became a family, not the kind written on paper, but the kind carved from exhaustion and loyalty. I learned to recognize the sound of their laughter from across the street, to tell who was crying just by the pitch. Every corner of the house carried traces of them, fingerprints on walls, mismatched shoes by the door, half-finished homework on the counter. And every night after they fell asleep, I would look at their faces and wonder if their mother was looking at the same moon I was, if she ever thought about them at all. Years passed like that, quietly, steadily, beautifully ordinary. The world forgot about my sister, and I stopped trying to remember her. But deep down, I always kept a small part of myself on alert, like a locked room in my chest that refused to rest. Because something in me knew that the past never really disappears. It waits. And sometimes it comes back wearing perfume and pretending to love again. There were moments when the kids called me Dad that my chest filled with pride and fear all at once. Pride, because I'd earned that word. Fear, because one day she might come back to take it away. I told myself it wouldn't happen. I told myself she was gone for good. I was wrong. She came back on a Tuesday. I remember because the sky was the color of tin and the air smelled like rain that never fell. I was mowing the lawn when a black Mercedes rolled up to the curb, sleek, expensive, wrong for our quiet street. The door opened, and there she was. My sister. 12 years older, 12 years colder. She stepped out like she'd rehearsed it. Designer heels, a pearl necklace, hair perfectly set. Her smile was cinematic. Practiced, hollow, the kind of smile you give to a stranger you're about to lie to. And standing next to her, with his hands in his pockets and sunglasses even though it was cloudy, was a man who looked like money personified. Tailored suit, polished shoes, a smirk that told me he thought this place, and I, were beneath him. "Hello, little brother," she said, her voice syrupy sweet, too smooth for reality. The words hit me like static. I hadn't heard that voice in over a decade, and yet it sounded exactly like the day she left. Only now, there was no tremor of fear, just control. I froze with the mower still humming. The kids, now teenagers, came to the door one by one. They stared, confused, some curious, some guarded. For a second, my sister's perfect smile faltered, just a flicker, as she took them in, her children, her strangers. "Kids," she called, forcing cheer. "It's Mom." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. Ava, the youngest, looked at me for permission. Ethan didn't move. He crossed his arms like a wall and said flatly, "Mom, who?" Her jaw tightened. She covered it with a laugh that was all air and no soul. "I missed you all so much," she said, stepping closer, her heels sinking into the soft grass. She reached out, tried to hug Ava, but the girl flinched. My sister froze mid-motion, then let her arms drop, turning to me with a strained smile. Well, that's understandable. Kids take time to adjust. "Adjust to what?" I asked. My voice was calm, too calm. "To being props in your next performance?" She blinked, once, twice, before the fake warmth returned. "You always were dramatic," she said lightly. "I'm just here to reconnect, to make things right." But the way she looked around the house told another story. Her eyes lingered on the furniture, the photos on the wall, the life I had built from the ashes she left behind. A flicker of calculation danced behind her lashes. That's when I knew. This wasn't a reunion. It was reconnaissance. Later, when the kids were upstairs, she sat across from me at the kitchen table, manicured fingers wrapped around a mug she didn't drink from. "You've done well," she said softly, "but it's time they came back with me. You know, this situation isn't appropriate. You're not their father, and honestly, you've done all you can. You should rest." "Rest," I repeated, the word sour on my tongue. "You mean hand them over?" She smiled, the kind that cuts without leaving a mark. "I've already spoken with my lawyer. We'll do this properly. No hard feelings." Her tone was polite, final, like she was talking about returning borrowed furniture, not flesh and blood. In that moment, the air around her seemed to change. The perfume, the posture, the calm arrogance, it all crystallized into something I hadn't wanted to see. Purpose. Cold, deliberate purpose. She hadn't come back for love. She'd come back for control. And for the first time, I felt something colder than anger. The quiet certainty that whatever she was planning had already begun. It happened on a morning that looked too peaceful to hold betrayal. The sun was cutting through the kitchen blinds in soft, golden lines. The kids were laughing over burnt toast and orange juice. I remember thinking, this is what a normal life finally feels like. Then came the knock. Heavy, rhythmic, official. Before I could even reach the door, I saw the uniforms through the window. Blue, gray, authority. My stomach tightened. Ethan's laughter stopped mid-sentence. When I opened the door, 2 officers stood there, flanked by a woman from Child Protective Services holding a folder and a rehearsed expression of sympathy. "Sir," one said, "we have a warrant for your arrest." I blinked. "What?" The words came out as a whisper, thin and useless. "For kidnapping," he continued. 4 minors, under your custody." The rest of his sentence drowned in the sound of my own heartbeat. The house went silent. The kids froze in the doorway. Ava's cereal spoon fell to the floor, clattering louder than it should have. "You've got the wrong person," I said, but the officer had already reached for his cuffs. When cold steel closed around my wrists, I looked over his shoulder, and there she was, my sister. Standing by her car at the edge of the driveway, designer sunglasses perched on her head, crocodile tears glinting in the light. She was crying for the cameras. Behind her, a van with the logo of a local news station idled, camera pointed right at us. She'd tipped them off. Of course she had. The social worker stepped forward. "Children, please come with me," she said softly, like she was taking puppies, not human lives. The kids started crying. Ethan tried to grab my arm, but one of the officers blocked him. "He didn't do anything," he shouted. "He's our dad." The woman winced, as if empathy was bad for paperwork. "Sweetheart, we just need to sort this out." Sort this out. The words echoed in my head as they led me outside. The neighbors gathered in clusters, filming, whispering. Someone muttered, "12 years? My God." The media headline hit before I even reached the station. "Local man accused of holding sister's children hostage for 12 years. By afternoon, my face was plastered across every screen in town. A mugshot beside words like criminal, abductor, monster, and my sister. She played her role flawlessly. On live TV, she sat with perfect posture, dabbing tears with a tissue, voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "I trusted him," she said. "I left my children for a short time when my life fell apart, and he never gave them back. I thought they were lost forever." The crowd, watching, ate it up. She was the tragic mother. I was the villain. They loved her story because it was clean, simple. No one wanted to ask why she'd really disappeared. No one wanted to look deeper than the headlines. In the holding cell, I stared at the gray wall until it blurred. Every moment from the past 12 years ran through my head. The nights I'd carried those kids to bed, the times I'd stayed awake through their fevers, the birthdays I'd scraped together money for. And now, all of it was evidence against me. When they released me on bail, the house was empty. The laughter, the drawings on the fridge, the smell of burnt toast, gone. The silence felt heavier than the cuffs had. I walked through each room slowly, touching the marks they'd left behind. Crayon lines on the wall, a forgotten shoe under the table, a photo of all 5 of us at the park. I sank to the floor and tried to breathe, but the air felt poisoned. She had planned this. Every move, every fake tear, every headline. And yet, even in that moment of ruin, one question burned hotter than the rest. Why now? After 12 years of silence, why come back just to destroy me? I didn't have the answer yet, but I made myself a promise. Right there on that kitchen floor, I would find out. And when I did, she'd regret every lie she'd ever told. The house felt like a tomb after they took the kids. Their laughter had been the heartbeat of this place, and now every room was a silent accusation. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I just sat there replaying everything, her face at the police station, the way she smiled for the cameras, the way her crocodile tears glistened like diamonds. It wasn't guilt that I saw in her, it was calculation. I needed answers. On the 3rd night, I went up to the attic. It was hot, thick with dust and the smell of forgotten things. The boxes were all marked with her handwriting, the same loops and curls I remembered from childhood. Sarah, old clothes, Sarah, baby stuff, Sarah, papers. At first, I was just looking for something, anything, to prove she had left the kids willingly. But under a pile of blankets, I found something better. A small silver laptop, the same one she used to bring everywhere. I remembered her tapping away on it late at night 12 years ago, saying she was handling paperwork. I plugged it in, half expecting it to be dead. To my surprise, it booted up with a low hum, the screen flickering to life. Her desktop appeared. An old background photo of her holding the kids at the park, back when she still pretended to love them. I felt sick. Most folders were empty or filled with useless things. Old photos, resumes, invoices. But one folder caught my eye. It was tucked inside a random directory, labeled simply Recipes. My sister never cooked a day in her life. I opened it. Inside were dozens of PDFs and email threads. The first email at the top stopped my breath cold. The subject line read, "Payment confirmed." It was from someone named Mark C., the same Mark who'd been standing beside her in that expensive suit when she returned. Mark C. The transfer's complete. Keep your side clean. Once the signatures are off the records, you're in the clear. Sarah. Good. I just need enough to hold me until the next payout. They'll believe I'm gone for good. Don't contact me again. I scrolled down, heart pounding. The timestamps matched the week she disappeared. Every new message revealed another layer of rot. They weren't talking about money between lovers. They were talking about government payouts, falsified forms, custody transfers. She had sold her own guardianship rights to access illegal welfare benefits under another name. She'd lied about being a single mother, claimed assistance for children she no longer cared for, the very kids she left with me. When she vanished, it wasn't escape from abuse or desperation. It was evasion. She had been under investigation for federal welfare fraud, and she ran before they could catch her. The deeper I read, the uglier it got. Fake Social Security numbers, false addresses, entire identities created to milk the system dry, and all of it signed off by one person, Sarah Collins. I clicked another email. Mark. They're asking questions. Someone from the agency called me yesterday. You better make sure your brother doesn't talk. If he ever finds out, it's over for both of us. That line hit me like a gunshot. I sat back, numb, the laptop screen burning white against the dark. So that's why she'd come back. Not for redemption, not for her children. She came back to shut me up before I could stumble onto the truth she buried 12 years ago. I started printing everything. Dozens of pages. Every transfer, every conversation, every receipt. My printer wheezed and clattered until stacks of paper piled high across the kitchen table. As I read, I could see her web unraveling, every lie leading back to her name, every forged document connecting her to crimes that would ruin her forever. The next morning, I brought the pages to my lawyer. He flipped through them in silence, then looked up with an expression that was equal parts shock and grim satisfaction. "This isn't just perjury," he said quietly. "This is federal fraud. If these documents are real, she's going to prison." But I wasn't thinking about prison, not yet. I was thinking about revenge, not the kind with fists or fury, but the kind that burns slow, methodical, righteous. I wanted her to watch the empire she'd built crumble piece by piece. I wanted her to feel the weight of every tear she'd forced from those kids, every humiliation she'd made me endure. She thought she'd framed me. She thought she'd won. But I had her truth now, and I was going to make sure the world saw it, one email at a time. That night, I turned off the light and stared at the stack of papers on the table. She'd spent 12 years burying her sins. Now, I was going to dig them all up. I hired a lawyer the morning after I filled 3 banker's boxes with printed emails, bank statements, and the forged forms I'd pulled from her laptop. Her name was Elise, sharp, relentless, the kind of attorney who made opposing counsel check their posture. She didn't promise miracles, she promised process. That was enough. We filed everything as an exhibit, the payment confirmed threads, screenshots of transfers, bank ledgers with shell accounts, the fake addresses tied to state agencies. Then Elise did what good lawyers do. She fed a carefully chosen dossier to one reporter who'd smelled a story beyond the sound bites. Within 48 hours, the cameras that had once circled me like vultures came back, but they had a different angle this time. When the day in court arrived, the room was full enough to hum. Neighbors who'd once whispered at the mailbox sat side by side with strangers who'd found the story online. The press gallery was packed. My sister looked smaller than her photographs suggested. Mark, when I saw him in the back, flanked by two men, didn't bother to hide his face. Elise opened her case, not with fury, but with calm. She walked the judge through the emails line by line, letting the messages speak for themselves. She showed the transfers, then pulled up the public records, tying those accounts to companies Mark controlled. She placed the forged benefit forms under the microscope and highlighted the telltale signatures. Each piece connected like a match to tinder. My sister sat at the plaintiff's table and at first stared straight ahead as if reciting a script. But when Elise read Mark's line, "If she ever talks, we're both screwed," I watched color drain from my sister's face. Her hands trembled. Her composure cracked into small human fragments. Under cross, she hesitated. Dates blurred. Explanations tangled into contradictions. The performance that had fooled a dozen anchors evaporated under the steady light of evidence. The turning point came when the kids were called. They walked into the courtroom with the tentative march of people who have learned to measure their steps to avoid making adults angry. Ethan was first. He stood with his chin up, voice steady in a way that made the whole room quiet. "He's my dad," he said simply. "He took care of us. He's the one who fixed my knee. He reads me stories." Ava's voice broke as she added, "She left us. He stayed." One by one, they told small truths. Who packed their lunches, who cheered at recitals, who sat with them through nightmares. There were no dramatic speeches, no theatrical reveals, just childlike testimony that carried the heavier truth. When the prosecution tried to paint me as manipulative, Elise countered with patience and precision. She didn't scream. She traced a straight line between the documents I'd found and the motives they hinted at. Money, identity, escape. The more she spoke, the less plausible the accusation against me appeared. The judge closed his eyes for a long moment, then announced the decision. I was not guilty. Relief hit me like a physical thing, a weight lifting so quickly it left me dizzy. But the ruling came with another consequence. The evidence we'd submitted triggered a federal referral. Agents would open a separate investigation into welfare fraud and the shell companies linked to Mark. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed again, but the story had a different shape now. Headlines shifted from "Kidnapping accusation" to "Welfare fraud investigation launched." My sister's allies melted away. Donations and sympathetic comments turned into questions and demands for answers. Mark's property holdings were scrutinized. Bank accounts were frozen. Her image, crafted and polished for years, unraveled in the light of documents she hadn't expected anyone to read aloud. She didn't go quietly into obscurity. There were lawyers and calls and frantic social media statements begging for mercy. But the pattern was plain. A woman who'd built a life on invented truths saw that life disintegrate, not because I'd wanted blood, but because she had built her future on sand. I didn't celebrate at her ruin. The victory felt cleaner as a return rather than a triumph, a reclamation of the small, ordinary life that had been ripped from us. The kids came out of the courthouse holding my hand, their faces tired and wary, but real. For the first time in years, I breathed without waiting for the next knock. We left before dawn, the city lights still yawning as we packed the car with the last of our life. A box of drawings, a dented coffee tin of loose change, an old blanket that smelled like bedtime. The kids were quiet at first, sleepy and small against the seats. For the first hour, I stared at the rearview mirror and watched their faces shift from fear to the cautious relief that comes after surviving something dark. Driving away felt like pulling a bandage off slowly. It hurt, but it was necessary. For a week, we hid in a town where no one knew our names. We ate greasy diner breakfasts, let the kids stay up for cartoons, and tried to remember how ordinary moments were supposed to feel. I checked the news once, furtively, as if danger might find me through a screen. That's when the headline hit. Former mother arrested in federal welfare fraud investigation. Her face was plastered across a different set of stories now. Not the plaintive mother reclaiming her children, but the architect of a long-running scam. The camera angles that had once made her look pitiful now made her look small and exposed. The arrest should have delivered the sort of closure I'd imagined. Instead, it was oddly anticlimactic. Justice moved through offices and paper. It didn't stitch back the nights we'd lost. Still, the truth was out, and whatever relief I felt was the slow, settling kind. Not a fireworks show, but a quiet rightness. A week later, an envelope slid beneath my motel door. No stamp, no return. Inside was a single folded note and a business card with a name I'd seen in the email threads, Mark C. The handwriting was crude and hurried. I called them. I couldn't live with it. You gave me the proof I needed. M. For a moment, I held the paper like it was something dangerous. My throat tightened not because of triumph, but because of how very small that admission made everything. Mark had been the hand behind so much of her life. The accounts, the transfers, the whispered transactions. His note was a confession and an absolution in one breath. He'd pulled the thread I couldn't reach and watched the whole thing unravel. Here's what no camera showed you. I didn't stumble onto those emails by accident, and I didn't bring them into the light the moment I found them. I watched. I collected. I waited. When she returned, I let her act out her part, speak her lies, and call the police. I let the world see her as she wanted to be seen because her accusation would pull the attention her past needed to face. I timed nothing by chance. I timed everything to let the truth crush her with its own weight. There's a certain cruelty in patience. There's also a justice to it. Watching someone dismantle their own life because they built it on falsehoods is a strange kind of vindication. It feels less like triumph and more like the closing of a wound. We never celebrated her fall. We went to the park, ate ice cream cones that dripped down our hands, and let the kids be messy and alive. The cameras moved on. The paperwork continued. She got what her choices had been designed to invite. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't destroying someone. It's letting them destroy themselves with their own lies.